My name is Eva, and I'm a designer at A-Flight. And at A-Flight, I work with a lot of developers. And something that I noticed happens a lot is that developers are working on a team and they don't have a designer on the team, or they don't have access to a designer. They kind of just end up making design decisions by themselves. So I created this talk for my coworkers so that when they find themselves in that situation, they're able to draw on some of the best practices from the discipline of user experience design. And that's what I'm going to share with you all today. So, as most of you probably already know, UX stands for user experience, and it's just the practice of making things simple, intuitive, and even delightful for people to use. Quick agenda, we're gonna go through the basics of user experience, and then I'm gonna teach you about what I think is the most useful piece of user experience design for developers to know, which is user testing. All right, so I come from an education background, and I really believe that you need to be in the right mindset before you learn something new. So everyone's gonna do a quick warm-up. I want you to talk to a neighbor about a time when you have been in the position of making design decisions. You have 1 minute, go. Great, so from what I could hear from just the people in the front, it sounds like most of you all have been in this situation before. So now that we're in the right mindset, let's get into user experience. One of the most important things about user experience and just designing for users in general is to remember that you are not the user, your client is not the user, and you're both actually the worst users. And that's because you're just too close to the product. You know exactly how it's supposed to work, you helped build it, you understand the business behind it, and this goes for designers too. This is anyone who is involved with it. It's just impossible for us to know what it's gonna be like for a first-time user going through the software or website or whatever it is. Now, a common thing that I'm sure we've all heard from clients or bosses is this phrase, why don't we just? You're talking about how a new feature should work, a flow, just trying to make a decision, and someone says, well, why don't we just do it this way, and kind of says whatever they think should happen. And you might agree with that, or you might be like, well, my instinct was actually to do something else, and you kind of get into this roundabout conversation where no one really knows the answer, everyone's kind of giving opinions, and it's really hard to break out of. So some language to break out of that conversation is to just call out the fact that, hey, we're all just speculating. We don't actually know what to do here. We should get some feedback from real users before we make a decision, and then we can move forward. So that brings us to how to get that information from users, which is user testing. And like I said before, I think this is the most valuable thing from the discipline of user experience design for developers to know. User testing is pretty much what it sounds like. It's just evaluation through testing with real users. Participants just try to complete a task that you give them, and you observe. Some basics, and this is what I do, it doesn't have to be timely or expensive. I usually just test other staff around me who are not on the project. It can be other developers, so long as they're not actually working on the same product. I found that testing as few as 5 users can yield significant results. And if it's just for a single feature, or sometimes it's the smallest little thing that you're trying to figure out, like how should we handle form error validation? Those things can be done in just 10 minutes with a user. So it doesn't have to be anything crazy or expensive. So that's how to do it, but how do we do it well? So I'm gonna give you a few tips on how to do the ultimate user testing. First, don't preload the user's expectations. If I come up to someone and I'm like, hey, I'm trying to figure out if this form error should be read right away or if it should wait until you move away from it, I think that that second one is really annoying. What about you? That is preloading the user's expectations, because even on a subconscious level, they're gonna wanna agree with me. So it's really important to keep things broad and general. You also wanna ask your users to think out loud. So once you give someone permission to just start saying their thoughts out loud, they're gonna just start talking. And that's a really good thing, because you wanna know everything they're thinking. So I usually say, can you just narrate out loud what you're doing, why you're clicking on something, what you expect to happen, if you're confused, stuff like that. And then this is the holy grail of all questions. When someone's saying something and they're kind of done, you just say, can you tell me more about that? And they will always have more to tell you, and that's when you get the most insightful information. Now, one of the hardest parts is asking the right type of question. So these are the types of questions you should avoid. Yes/no questions, because you'll get a yes/no answer. Compound questions, which is when there's actually 5 questions in one. And that's how we really talk in normal conversation, but it's not going to be good for user testing. You want just a simple, concrete question. And then, like I said, leading questions, where I'm actually leading you to the answer that I hope you're going to give, that's not useful at all. So it's really important to take the time, just 10 or 20 minutes, to really think through the questions that you're going to ask and just write them out ahead of time. So once again, like I said, I come from education, so we're going to practice this because that's the best way to learn a new thing. So first of all, what type of question is this? Should the search results update in real time? Yes, no, awesome. Okay, so now back with your partners, you're going to rephrase this to be a better question. You have 1 minute, go ahead. When should the search results update? Awesome, that is not a yes or no question. You've made it a lot more broad, cool. All right, next question. When you're filling out a form, for example, putting in your email address, do you prefer that the inputs are a red error state until you fill them out correctly and then they turn green, or that they're only red or green after you move away from the text field, or something else altogether? What type of question is this? Compound. Awesome. Okay, you know how this works. Get with your partners and rephrase. How do you know you filled out the form correctly? Awesome. That's super open, and it's one question, so good job. All right, this is the last one. Some people think text fields should be red until it fills out correctly, and then it's turned green. I think that's annoying. What do you think? I kind of already said this one, but what is this? It's a leading question. All right, last time, get with your partners and rephrase. Give 2 different options and see what they prefer. That's a really good idea, yeah. And then you don't have to say anything about which one you think is annoying, which one you want them to do. Yeah, that's an awesome answer. All right, thanks for going through that activity. Hopefully after practicing a little bit, it'll come really easy when you have to do this in the real world. So after you've gone through this process of user testing and done this with, like I said, I think at least 5 users is enough, your decisions are now backed by research and data. And even though this isn't data in the way that I'm sure most people in the room are used to thinking about data, it is still data, and it is still really valuable. And now when you go back to your client or boss or whoever, instead of people just saying, I think it should work like this, you can say, my research showed that it should work like this. And that's going to be a lot more harder, or a lot more difficult to argue with. So quick recap on what we learned today. Insight from outsiders is essential. We're incapable of putting ourselves in their shoes, and we need to just test people who have never actually seen our products. Simple, open-ended, non-leading questions, which you all got to practice. The question, can you tell me more about that, which is essential and will always get people who have stopped talking to continue to talk and get insights. And then finally, we have research and data over just opinions and the loudest person in the room winning. That's everything. There's my contact info, and thank you.